Hi. I hope you can see me okay because sometimes it is way too dark. Hmm. Okay, well, hopefully this will work. Um, sorry, a pop-up screen just popped up, so whatever. Okay, today I wanted to talk about how to deal with awkward moments of prejudice or racism or actually just any form of prejudice when you're a highly sensitive person. Particularly in my case, it would be being a highly sensitive person who is also a person of color. That can be really, really tough to navigate because, first of all, you're feeling hurt because you feel highly sensitive people. It's believed that we feel more or bigger emotions than the average person, as far as I understand. Um, And at the same time, a lot of us are also very empathetic, which means we don't want to hurt the other person who may have triggered those emotions. So it can be really confusing when you're in this awkward situation of having to deal with prejudice. Um, and there are some ways to navigate it. It's just it takes it takes self-control to navigate it. It does take some humility too. Um, and it takes a lot of empathy. And also, what my strategy or what I try to do, the way I try to navigate it, is not the only way. There are other options, and there may be better options than what I'm going to talk about today. This is just something that I've learned from experience, and I'll relate one of the experiences that led me to this conclusion like, okay, this way of dealing with prejudice might work best for me. So, what I'm saying may not work for everyone. And if you have another strategy or a better way of dealing with prejudice, please feel free to leave it in the comments section. So, first of all, let's say that I'll give you an example of where this might happen. Um, let's say that you're at work, and let's say that a coworker who you know and you enjoy their company. I mean, sometimes they say things that are a little, mm, questionable, but you enjoy their company for the most part. But they say something that is completely prejudiced. It might be about your people of your culture or about people of another culture. And it just, for a moment, it takes you by surprise and you're shocked. And then that shock becomes hurt. You process it as hurt and maybe even anger. So, how do you deal with that? Well, I'll give you an example of a time when this happened to me, and I tried to handle it appropriately, but I'm not sure that what I did worked. Okay, so I was at work, and this was a few years ago, and one of my coworkers, who we had a lot of pleasant conversations with each other, but one day she said something like, "I don't understand." Something similar to this. I don't understand why Black people get special advantages. Like you can get these scholarships so easily. It's just not fair. If I wish I was Black, then I could get that. Maybe my life would be easier. And at first, I was shocked. So I just stared at her. And then that shock became hurt because I don't even need to go into the because I'm sure that anyone watching this understands why a Black woman hearing that would feel hurt. And then I was also kind of angry, although I don't get angry usually. It takes a lot for me to get angry, but I was a little annoyed. Um, what I did is I launched into an explanation, and I'm not a yeller, so I wasn't yelling. I was talking to her just like I'm speaking right now, trying to explain, but it just wasn't getting through. She was just saying, oh, yeah, I still don't understand. And then people around us started listening to the conversation and they started getting angry at her. So in that case, just right off the bat, trying to explain and drill logic into someone, that didn't work that time. And I don't think that usually works. What I think would have been better in retrospect is to, first of all, I should have just given myself a minute. When I was initially shocked to hear my coworkers say that, I should have kept quiet and internally acknowledged my feelings, acknowledged that I was hurt and that it's okay for me to be hurt. It doesn't mean that I'm weak. Just acknowledge the fact that I am not happy right now with what my coworker just said. And then secondly, to try and understand, why is this person who is generally very pleasant and pretty kind, why are they saying something that is so hurtful? And there may be several reasons why. And once again, these first two steps, they involve reacting in no way whatsoever. So you might just, when the person has said their racist or prejudiced thing, if you want to do this, you might just take a beat, look at them and, acknowledge that they said something, but not speak. And instead, in your mind, acknowledge your feelings and validate them. And then secondly, try to figure out why this person said what they said. And there might be several factors why. The first one is is their personality type a bit attention seeking? Do they sometimes just say things just because they want the attention that they believe it will garner? So they may not actually believe what they said. They may just want a little bit of attention, want someone to look at them. Maybe that's it. And if that's the case, me personally, I would just ignore them. I'll just be like, okay, whatever. Or could it be that they are sincere? They're not attention seeking. They really were just sharing a heartfelt feeling or thought that they had with you. And in that case, that warrants yet another question. Why would such a generally kind, good person say something so prejudiced or have such prejudiced feelings in their heart? Why? And you might want to take a moment to think about that a little bit more. The answer might be that they possibly experienced some sort of trauma. Sometimes, you know how it is, for example, like let's say you're in a really bad car accident, a really bad one that left you injured. Well, you might not want to get in any car or any vehicle for the next 6 months. Is that logical? Well, it's highly unlikely that every time the person steps into a vehicle, they will get into a horrible car accident. That's very unlikely. So you could say it's illogical, but at the same time, our brain, the way we're wired, is we're wired to acknowledge our fear so that we can learn to avoid things that could cause us danger. So when our fear goes into overdrive, and I'm not a scientist, so I'm not like explaining this the right way, but I'm sure you can understand what I'm trying to say. When our fear goes into overdrive, sometimes we overcompensate for threats of danger or what we perceive may be threats of danger. And we start saying no to things that we should say yes to just because we've been traumatized. So in that vein, if you look at it that way, it can kind of make sense for a person who's been traumatized by a car accident to avoid getting in any vehicles whatsoever for like 6 months or maybe even longer. Is that the right choice? It will hinder their life, but maybe that's the best they can do without therapy for the time being. So similarly, I can't say that word, even though this is terrible, let's say that someone who looked like me hurt someone who was not a person of color. That person may have been traumatized So now every time they see someone who looks like me, they walk the other way or they get a feeling of anxiety. Is that logical? No, because not most people who look like me, who have my skin color, are not criminals and are not going to hurt someone. But if you look at it from a chemical, from the way we're made, or from a biological, that's what I'm trying to say, from a biological viewpoint, where trauma can make us overcompensate in our reactions to potential threats of danger, you can understand why someone might feel that way and why, without the proper therapy, they will continue to act in that way, um, even though it can be hurtful to themselves and to the people around them. So it takes a lot of empathy for the person who is on the receiving end of that because they happen to look, you know, they happen to have the skin color that triggers someone else's fear. It takes a lot of empathy for someone like us, and I would say humility too, to be like, okay, that's what this person is feeling, and to try and understand it. To understand that it's not okay, but I get it. Because that can help minimize our anger towards this person by understanding that they experience some sort of trauma. Or it could be that they were raised in a household where prejudice was the norm. So they grew up not knowing any differently. And then when they left their parents' home and that society, they learned more. So they're still in the process of slowly expanding their worldview. Like maybe they've never had any friends who are people of color. So they don't realize the things that they are saying are hurtful because they grew up in an environment where people said things like that about people of color all the time. So that again, it would require empathy, a lot of empathy from the person on the receiving end of the prejudice. And that's a lot. It's a lot. But in the end, it can be, if we keep a balanced point of view about it, it can be healthier for us because it can make us less angry, more understanding, um, and it can better equip us to fight back against prejudice. Because you can do a lot when you're angry. There's a lot you can accomplish just with pure anger. But anger can also lead to violence. It can also make things worse. So if I use an empathetic approach and I depend on that in my response to fighting racism and prejudice, I might have a better shot at actually helping someone who has prejudiced viewpoints to shift their mindset. I might be better equipped to educate them about what prejudice is and why it's wrong. If I'm able to, um, approach it from a more, I guess, um, a less abrasive, confront it in a less abrasive manner. Which, even as I say that, I'm cringing because honestly, you have a right to be angry and you have a right to be as abrasive as you want to be when someone is prejudiced. You do, you really do. You're within your rights. But just because within your rights doesn't mean that anger won't lead to violence and to things that are just horrible. So sometimes it is better to just take a beat and try to tap into our empathy and then use that to help us shift the tone of the conversation and maybe even shift another person's viewpoint and educate them. So this is really tough, but okay. So those were the first two steps: to first of all acknowledge my feelings. I am hurt. I have a right to be hurt. I'm also a little angry and annoyed. I have a right to be that way because what they said was terrible. Secondly, Try to figure out, why did they say that? Are they just seeking attention, or is this a real feeling that they're expressing to me? If it's a real feeling, where did those feelings come from? Because they're not normal. So where did those feelings come from? Try to figure that out, as quickly as you can. And then the third point might be to start interacting with the person, but to be sure to do so in a respectful manner. So respectfully clarify what they've just said to make sure that I didn't misunderstand them. That's really important, because sometimes we do misunderstand people. So I might have said something like, wait a second, so let me just make sure I understand what you said. Are you saying that you think it's unfair for Black women to receive scholarships because of that are based on their culture or skin color, ethnicity? You think that's unfair and unjust? Is that right? Just make sure that you have a clear understanding of what they said, because possibly what they said was racist, but what they meant was completely different. Or maybe they just said something racist because they actually harbor racist feelings or prejudice feelings. So you got to clarify it. The fourth thing would be where this is the point where we start asking them questions to figure out the answers to the questions that we were trying to ask ourselves earlier when we took a beat. Remember when we asked in step number 2, why are they saying this? Are they saying this because they grew up in a prejudiced household? Are they saying this because they experienced a trauma at the hands of someone maybe who looked like me? Why are they saying this? This is the point where we get to ask that, but in a respectful way. And one respectful way or a gentle and empathetic way to dress that question, like dress it up so it looks nice, is to maybe say, oh, that's really interesting. Have you always felt that way? It's not a challenging question. It might be challenging to say something like, well, that's dumb. Well, why do you feel like that? That's stupid. That could, even though you're within your rights to say that, because what they said probably is very stupid, but that would only foster an argument. That would be like throwing, I don't know, a bottle of wine into a fire. And you don't want that. What you want is a calm environment where this person feels safe, because when people feel safe, they're more open. They open their mind, and and you have a better chance of educating them, of helping them learn more. Whereas if they're all defensive and, oh, she thinks I'm stupid, are they going to be able to receive anything? No. So this is where our is it social intelligence? I think that's the word. Social intelligence comes into play. We have to be smart about the way that we talk to people. So a question that gets to the heart of why they feel the way they feel, it has to be, or it should be, presented in a way that's very gentle and that puts them at ease and doesn't make them defensive. So, like I said, one way to do that might be to ask or say something like, that's really interesting. Have you always felt that way? And then listen as they open up and tell you their story about where their feelings come from. And that'll give you more insight into their background and their insecurities. Because most of the time, prejudice is built upon fear and insecurity within oneself. It's very rarely purely about the other people who are the target of prejudice. It's very rarely purely about those people, but it's usually from an inborn feeling of insecurity and fear. So by allowing this person to open up, you're learning what their fear actually is, where this prejudice is coming from. So that helps you know how to respond to them in a way that will be the most effective. So after listening to them explain why they feel the way they feel, then you can respectfully share a more logical viewpoint. Like, for example, if I had done that with this coworker and asked her, why do you feel the way you feel? Or have you always felt that way? She might have said something like, um, I don't know, I'm just guessing. This is just imaginary. She might have said, well, growing up, I was just as poor as a lot of my poor Black friends, and I didn't get any scholarships. So it made me feel like I didn't have as much of an opportunity as they did. And now some of them have really great jobs, and I'm still struggling. And you know what I could say to that? I could say, I can definitely relate to that because growing up, I've had friends who were different races from me. They weren't Black. I had a lot of friends, let's just say white. I hate using the word white. I had a lot of white friends who we grew up in similar economic situations, and yet they had more advantages than I did in certain ways. Because, for example, I would go into a job interview, and the moment the interviewer looked at the color of my skin, the moment they saw that I was Black, I lost. I lost that job opportunity before I even opened my mouth. Whereas my friends who have the same educational background as me, um, they're very similar to me in almost every way, except for the color of their skin. They go to the same place and they get the job. And it's not because they have skills that I don't have, it's because they look the part. Um, and so I can definitely relate to how you're feeling. It sucks to feel like other people have opportunities that you don't. Um, and in fact, and you could say, in fact, that's the reason why these scholarship opportunities exist for not just Black people, but for other people of color and for people who are not persons of color, but who are also considered minorities. It can be someone who has a disability. There are lots of other things that in this world can become obstacles because of prejudice. Because people with disabilities, no matter what they look like on the outside, no matter what race, I mean, they may be, they experience prejudice too a lot of times if they have a visible disability. Um, there are other factors too that can like contribute to a person being treated with prejudice. So that's why there are scholarships that cover almost all of those, not just Black people, but a lot of different races and a lot of different cultures. And when I say culture, that's not limited to skin color. That means languages. Deafness is a culture. um, so that's why scholarships, those specialty scholarships, exist to protect people like you and I both, to make sure that we both have opportunities. And then I would go on and explain that I didn't get any scholarships. I wish I had. And I've searched for them, but I didn't get any. Um, so, and there are a lot more logical ways to kind of like defend why Black people do get scholarships that are culturally based. I just can't think of them right now. But there are plenty more explanations and really good, um, solid reasons why that is a very good thing. It's a good thing that those scholarships exist. And you could Google that, and then you might even Google it with the person. Like say, hey, let's look this up. Let's get an answer to your question. Go to Google and just kind of calmly and respectfully navigate that. And by the end of that, they might say, okay, that actually makes sense. But there is one more step. And I think this is one of the most important. But it is also kind of important, I believe, now that I'm older, that it should not be the first step because I used to make this my first step, but it should be one of the last. And I think that step is to tell the person, I just have to tell you that when you said that, it really did hurt my feelings. Like, I don't harbor any ill will towards you. I think you're a lovely person. Or we're friends if you are. And we always will be friends if you always will be friends. But I do have to say that what you said really, really gutted me because I experience prejudice on a daily basis. And I didn't expect that from someone who I respect so much and who I care for. Because that triggers their empathy, which is what you want. That is the goal. If people were more empathetic, their fear would be lessened, their fear would decrease, which would mean that their prejudice would decrease. And if you can get someone to empathize with you, to think, oh my goodness, my friend is hurt. I hurt my friend. Then that can make them stop and think before they allow themselves to, before they feel a feeling of prejudice, thought, or feeling come up, they might remember, okay, that hurt my friend when I tapped into these feelings and I acted on them. I hurt someone I care about. And there are lots of people who look like my friend who are good people. I would hurt them too if I tapped into this. And that can help them to put those prejudice feelings aside or work through them, like figure out where they really come from and squash them. So I don't know. I'm not a therapist, and some of this might be wrong, but it just seems like a very a tough, but more not logical. I can't think of words right now. I'm sorry, I'm really tired. It might be a tough way to deal with prejudice when you're a highly sensitive person of color, but I feel like it is worth it because it can help you to maintain friendships with people who just like us, they make mistakes and they have wrong points of view that need to be adjusted. We all have those, but it can help you to maintain some sort of bond with them if that's what you want to do. It can also help them learn something, learn more, and it can help us learn more too. Because, like, there's a Hebrew proverb that says, the insight of a man slows down his anger. And I really believe that's true. It's hard to learn when you're just so angry, you're just all you see is red. And it's easy to get angry when you are a target of racism or prejudice. But if you're dealing with a person who is mentally stable, but who does have these weird prejudice feelings, and you get to the root of where those feelings come from, and you try to understand and help them work through them, it helps you to learn too because it builds up your armor against prejudice and helps you to figure out how to navigate it the next time that happens. Because there will be a next time, unfortunately. It's just like to say that the only time I have not faced, the only times I have not faced prejudice in a day is if I stay home all day, honestly, because it's just everywhere in the world. And I say that, but that's probably not even true because when you turn on the TV, you often see it, even in ads in very subtle ways. Um, like some factors of marketing, and this is a whole nother subject. When I started studying like marketing and advertising, some of the ways in which demographics are parsed, and the way that people of different demographics are targeted is a little bit prejudiced. And when used by someone with ill intent, it can be very demoralizing to people of that particular demographic. And I've seen big companies do this. Like as a Black woman, I can tell when some big company is trying to sell a product to me, and they think that they are reaching my heart or making me more prone to want to buy their product by what they're doing with their marketing. And really, it's just insulting me. So that's a whole nother subject that can be saved for another time. But yeah. And I see there's a comment here from Melly. Let's see. She said, I think the best thing to do is to move and find better people who don't have this racial virus coursing through their veins, or change the environment that we live in. Yeah, that is nice. That is a nice option to have, to move, to just get out of the situation. That's very true. Um, and if that is what you can do, I would recommend that for sure. Why not? Move somewhere where you're going to be accepted and you don't have to work so hard just to be accepted. You can walk down the street without people clutching their purses. Or one thing I've noticed is if I'm in the grocery store and I'm approaching, let's say there's some tea, I'm walking to the tea section. So I've got my little basket and there's someone already there who doesn't look like me. A lot of times they'll see me and startle and then walk the other way. And in case you don't know, I'm from Louisiana, the deep South. That happens almost every time I go to the grocery store. So yeah, it would be great to live somewhere where it's not like that. But there are those of us who don't have the option to move. Like I can't move right now. I don't have the financial means to do that. So that's why I've tried to come up with these ways to lessen my anger, because I get very angry. First, I get very depressed, very sad, because I start to wonder, this is silly, but I start to wonder, well, maybe this is warranted. Maybe there is something wrong with Black people. Maybe there's something wrong with us. That is ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. But that's the direction your mind goes in when you face it every single day, multiple times, over and over again, in subtle ways and in big ways. And sometimes the subtle ways are the worst. So to try and counter those feelings, I'm trying to learn to be more empathetic with people and figure out that my skin color is not the problem. The problem is something that happened in their life that they grew up with. It's something with them. It's not my skin color that's the problem. So yeah, this was a really long video. So thank you for hanging in there if you did. And thank you, Melly, for your really good observation. I always appreciate your comments. All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.